The fork scraped lightly against porcelain as Emily pushed the last bite of overcooked chicken around her plate. She wasn't hungry, though she pretended she was, keeping her eyes fixed on the neat rhythm of her movements instead of looking up. Across the table, Daniel sat with his posture too perfect, too still, as if every muscle had been trained not to give anything away. They had eaten this way many nights, sharing space but not conversation. Once there had been laughter, teasing, even heated debates that ended in smiles. Now silence filled the dining room like a thick fog, pressing against Emily's ribs until she wanted to scream just to cut through it. Her gaze flicked upward, catching the shadow of his jawline under the dim light. He wasn't watching her. His eyes seemed fixed on something far away. A crease at his temple suggested thought, serious thought, but he never offered her a window into it anymore. She hated herself for wondering whether she wanted to know. When she finally broke the silence, her voice came out brittle. "You're late again." Daniel didn't flinch. He simply reached for his glass of water, drank slowly, and set it back down. "Work," he said, the single word sharp, final. The air felt heavier after he spoke. Emily searched his face for cracks, an expression, a flicker, anything, but he had perfected that unreadable calm. She wondered fleetingly if she had imagined the faint, rust-colored stain she noticed earlier on his cuff, just before he rolled his sleeves up. She tried to steady her breathing, but the thought lodged like a thorn. He was hiding something. She didn't know what, didn't dare guess, but the weight of it lived in the pause between his words, in the hollow ring of their silence. Outside, the wind rattled the windows. The sound startled her, reminding her of how isolated the house had begun to feel. Daniel glanced at her then, finally, and the corner of his mouth tilted in something that might have been a smile or might have been a warning. Emily swallowed hard, knowing that tonight's quiet carried more than fatigue. It carried secrets, and as the clock ticked past midnight, the first knock would come at their door. The first knock came low and deliberate, shaking Emily from her uneasy half-sleep. She lay still for a moment, her mind clouded, heart racing. Then it came again, louder, urgent, echoing through the quiet house. She reached for Daniel's side of the bed but found only cool sheets. Her pulse quickened as she pulled on her robe and stepped into the hallway. Downstairs, the shadows stretched longer than usual, warped by the faint glow of the porch light, seeping through the glass panel in the door. The knocking persisted, 3 hard pounds this time, rattling the frame. Emily hesitated, dread twisting inside her. Before she could decide whether to answer, Daniel appeared from the kitchen. His shirt sleeves were still rolled up from dinner, his face startlingly calm. Without a word, he gestured for her to step aside. When he opened the door, 2 uniformed officers stood on the porch, their expressions somber. Cold night air rushed in, carrying the faint smell of rain and something metallic. "Sorry to disturb you," one officer said, voice steady but edged with tension. "There's been an incident nearby. We're checking with all the houses on this street." Emily's stomach dropped. "What kind of incident?" she asked, her voice barely audible. The officer's gaze lingered on her before shifting to Daniel. "A violent crime. We're canvassing the area to see if anyone heard or saw anything unusual tonight." Daniel's expression didn't flicker. His reply was smooth, practiced. "We haven't seen or heard a thing." "Quiet night here," Emily blinked. The lie, because she had heard something earlier, a muffled noise outside before dinner, burned on her tongue. But Daniel's tone was so certain, so final, that she found herself silent. The officers exchanged a glance. One scribbled notes while the other leaned forward. "If you think of anything, no matter how small, call this number." He handed Daniel a card. Daniel nodded once, then closed the door with careful precision. Emily turned to him, whispering harshly, "Why didn't you let me speak?" Because there was nothing to say," he interrupted, voice flat, controlled. His eyes lingered on her just long enough to silence her. Emily's throat tightened. His composure wasn't that of a man disturbed by police at midnight. It was something else, something colder. As she returned to bed, the echo of the officer's words clung to her. A violent crime. And in Daniel's stillness, she felt the first real crack in the glass of their marriage. Sleep never returned that night. Emily lay rigid, her mind looping through the sound of the knocks, the stern faces of the officers, and Daniel's steady, unflinching voice. By morning, her body ached with tension, and her trust felt thinner than glass stretched to breaking. Over breakfast, Daniel sipped his coffee with deliberate calm. He spoke of deadlines at work, of a new project, his tone almost cheerful. Yet when Emily asked what time he had come home the night before, his answer stumbled. "Around 9, he said, eyes fixed on the newspaper. But she remembered the creak of the front door well past 11, the lie lodged in her chest like a shard. Later, as she gathered laundry, she noticed the faint, rust-colored blotches along the cuff of his discarded shirt. She touched the fabric, her fingers trembling, the iron scent rising faintly. Daniel had claimed he spilled wine earlier in the week, but she couldn't recall any bottle opened, any glass poured. Her thoughts tangled, looping back to a softer time. She remembered the man who once danced with her in their kitchen at midnight, who whispered promises of forever against her hair. She remembered road trips, laughter, the ease of trust, but those memories flickered like a scratched film reel, unstable, unreliable against the image of the man who had stared down the police without blinking. Was she overreacting? Was this exhaustion warping her mind? Daniel had always said she was too sensitive, that she read too much into things. Maybe she was, maybe, but her pulse quickened whenever he entered the room, as if her body recognized something her heart resisted. She studied him now with different eyes, the stiffness of his smile, the precision of his movements, the way his phone never left his pocket anymore. The cracks widened each day. Emily tried to fill them with denial, with fragile hope, but the pressure built. That evening, when Daniel told another half-story about staying late at the office, she nodded quietly. Yet inside, her doubt screamed, because cracks once formed never heal. They spread, creeping silently until the whole pane shatters, and Emily was beginning to fear that hers was about to break. The lie pressed against Emily's chest all evening, impossible to swallow. By the time Daniel came home, she was sitting at the edge of the couch, his shirt with the faint stains folded neatly on her lap, like evidence she was afraid to present. When he stepped through the door, his smile flickered, brief, restrained, before he leaned down to kiss her forehead. "Long day," he murmured, his voice velvet soft, the kind of tone he once used to soothe her. She held up the shirt. "What is this, Daniel? I asked you last night what time you came home. You said 9, but it was after 11? And these stains, what are they really?" For a moment, silence. Then he chuckled lightly, shaking his head. "Emily, you're tired. You misremember things when you don't sleep well. We've talked about this before." Her stomach twisted. "I saw the clock. I heard the door. Don't tell me I imagined it." He crossed the room slowly, crouching so his eyes met hers. His hand rested on her knee, warm, steady, almost tender. "Sweetheart, I'd never lie to you. You know that." His voice dripped with assurance, as though her doubts were a child's nightmares, easily dismissed. But when she pressed, his tone hardened, a sharp edge cutting through the softness. "Do you realize how damaging it is when you accuse me like this? You twist harmless things into monsters. It's exhausting, Emily, for both of us." Her throat closed, guilt surging even as fear burned behind her ribs. Maybe she was imagining too much. Maybe the sleepless nights and the whispers of suspicion had distorted everything. And yet, his eyes didn't match his words. They were flat, unyielding, like a wall built to keep her on the outside. Emily lowered the shirt, but the unease didn't fade. It grew, because the first lie once told was rarely the last. The morning after their argument, Emily woke to an empty house. Daniel had left early. Too early, the coffee pot still cold, the sheets barely disturbed. She wandered through the quiet rooms, clutching his shirt as if it might confess what he would not. The doorbell startled her. Sunlight poured across the entryway as she opened it to find a woman in plain clothes, a badge hanging discreetly from her neck. "Mrs. Hale?" the woman asked. Her voice was calm, but her eyes were sharp. "Detective Harper. May I come in?" Emily hesitated, fingers tightening on the doorknob. Something in Harper's presence unsettled her. Not aggressive, but unyielding, like a current she couldn't resist. Still, she stepped aside. They sat at the kitchen table, the one still littered with remnants of last night's uneasy dinner. Harper's gaze scanned the room before settling on Emily. "I won't take much of your time. We're following up on the incident nearby. Your husband was spoken to, correct? Emily nodded. Yes, he said we didn't know anything. Harper tilted her head. Did he? Her tone carried a subtle weight, as though she knew more than she let on. Mrs. Hale, sometimes people close to an investigation aren't entirely forthcoming. Out of fear. Or loyalty. A chill ran down Emily's spine. What are you implying? Harper leaned back, hands folded. Your husband's name came up in connection to a case years ago. Different city, different circumstances. Nothing conclusive, but let's just say his presence wasn't incidental. The words struck like ice water. Emily's breath caught. A past she had never heard of. A shadow never mentioned. You must be mistaken, she whispered, though her voice lacked conviction. I hope I am, Harper said simply. But secrets have a way of bleeding through the years. If you notice anything at all, please contact me directly. She slid a card across the table. When the door closed behind her, Emily stood frozen, Harper's words echoing through her mind. A history she didn't know. A stranger wearing her husband's face. She clutched the card so tightly it bent in her hand, staring at the soil-streaked backyard through the window. For the first time, Emily wondered if the truth was closer to home than she dared imagine. The detective's card burned in Emily's pocket all afternoon. She couldn't stop replaying Harper's words. His name came up before. A past she didn't know. A shadow stitched into the seams of their life. By evening, Daniel had not returned. The silence of the house gnawed at her, louder than any argument. She moved aimlessly, dusting shelves that didn't need dusting, wiping counters already clean. Eventually, her gaze drifted to the backyard. The garden had always been Daniel's territory. He took pride in trimming the hedges, turning the soil, planting neat rows of vegetables. She used to love watching him work there, sleeves rolled, dirt under his nails, as if grounding their life in something steady. But now, as the setting sun painted long streaks across the yard, the soil looked darker in patches, freshly disturbed. Something in her chest tightened. She slipped on her shoes, stepping into the cool evening air. The earth felt uneven beneath her feet, softer in places. She crouched, pressing her hand into the dirt. It yielded too easily, damp and heavy. Her breath caught. The metallic tang hit her nose first, subtle, unmistakable. Her fingers shook as she dug into the loosened soil, nails filling with grit, hands trembling. The deeper she clawed, the stronger the scent grew until the tip of her finger brushed something coarse. She pulled back, heart hammering. It was cloth, stiffened, stained dark. The unmistakable smell of iron clung to it. Daniel? Her voice cracked against the quiet. Daniel! The back door creaked open behind her. She turned, dirt-streaked and trembling as he stepped out. His silhouette was framed by the kitchen light, his face unreadable in shadow. What are you doing? His tone was calm, too calm. Emily scrambled to her feet, holding out her filthy hand. What is this? What's buried here? He descended the steps slowly, deliberately, until he stood only a few feet away. His expression was smooth, practiced. A mask she couldn't break. You shouldn't be out here at night, he said softly as though scolding a child. I found something, she whispered, voice raw. Cloth blood. Daniel's eyes flickered just for a second, before his calm deepened into something colder. He reached out, brushing soil from her sleeve with terrifying gentleness. Emily, you're exhausted. You've been seeing things that aren't there. You've let that detective poison your mind. Her stomach twisted. The gaslight flickered again, wrapping around her like a noose. But the smell lingered on her hands, undeniable, metallic, and real. He leaned close, his breath steady. Promise me you'll stop digging where you don't belong. Emily froze, the warning laced with tenderness. And in that moment she realized the truth. The garden wasn't hiding secrets anymore. It was warning her of the man who kept them. Emily avoided the garden for the next 2 days, but its image haunted her every waking thought. The soft soil, the smell of iron, Daniel's unnerving calm. She scrubbed her hands raw, yet she still felt the dirt beneath her nails. Daniel, however, moved through the house as though nothing had happened. He cooked breakfast, kissed her cheek, and asked about her errands in a voice so gentle, it almost convinced her she had imagined everything. Almost. But in the small moments, the cracks appeared. She saw them in the sharp flicker of his eyes when she lingered too long at the back door, in the way his jaw clenched when the phone rang unexpectedly. in the calculated pauses before he answered her simplest questions. One evening, as she folded laundry, Daniel entered the room without a sound. She jumped, the shirt slipping from her hands. His smile was there, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Nervous?" he asked lightly. "I didn't hear you," she muttered, but her voice wavered. He stepped closer, brushing the fallen shirt from her hands, his touch careful, precise. "You've been on edge. I don't like seeing you this way." His tone was tender, but there was something rehearsed in it, something hollow. Her chest tightened. She wanted to believe him, to cling to the man who once held her in laughter and warmth. But the man before her was a stranger wearing Daniel's skin, his affection like lines in a script. That night she lay awake, staring at the ceiling while his breathing beside her remained steady, controlled. She thought of Detective Harper's warning, of the buried cloth, of the lies layered one atop another. And still, part of her prayed she was wrong, that her mind had twisted shadows into monsters. Because if she was right, then she was sleeping beside something far worse than a liar. In the darkness, Daniel shifted, murmuring her name in his sleep. The sound should have soothed her. Instead, it felt like a hand tightening around her throat. The mask was slipping. And Emily knew she couldn't pretend much longer. The night was thick with silence, broken only by the ticking clock in the hallway. Emily lay on her side, eyes wide open, staring into the dark. Daniel's steady breathing beside her mocked her unease. She couldn't stand it anymore. "Daniel," she whispered. No response. She raised her voice slightly. "Daniel, wake up!" He stirred, rolling toward her with deliberate slowness, his eyes opening without surprise. It was as if he'd been awake the entire time. "What is it?" His voice was calm, too calm. "I need to know," she said, her throat tight. "The garden. The stains. The police at the door. I can't pretend anymore." He sat up, rubbing his face, then sighed as though she were a child interrupting his rest. "Emily, you're letting fear control you. I've told you there's nothing to worry about." Her voice cracked. "Don't lie to me again." A long pause stretched between them. Then Daniel smiled faintly in the dark. "You want the truth? Fine." Emily's breath caught. "I was out late because someone needed me," he said carefully. "Not for work. Not for anything you'd understand. But I was helping. Cleaning up something that could have destroyed us both." Her heart hammered. "What do you mean, us both?" He leaned closer, his words a hiss against her ear. "You think you're separate from me, Emily? Everything I do with our life in mind. Our safety, our future. That's what marriage means." "That's not an answer," she whispered, trembling. He laughed softly, bitterly. "If I told you everything, you'd run straight to Harper, wouldn't you? You'd let her tear this house apart. But if you keep quiet, if you stay loyal, then no one ever needs to know what's buried out there." Her stomach churned. "So there is something." Daniel's hand closed over hers, firm, unyielding. "Don't twist my words. I said enough. And now you're part of it. You've dug in the garden. You've seen what's there. That makes you complicit." Her throat tightened, panic and shame colliding inside her. "I didn't." "Yes, you did." His grip tightened. "If anyone asks, it won't be just me they'll suspect. It'll be you too. Think about that." Tears burned her eyes. He was binding her with invisible chains, weaving her silence into his survival. When he finally lay back down, his breathing slowed again, as if nothing had passed between them. But Emily remained rigid, trapped in the dark, replaying his words. Complicit. The manipulation was complete, suffocating. And yet beneath it, one thought pulsed louder than fear. She needed to know who else was tangled in Daniel's secrets. Morning light filtered weakly through the curtains, but Emily felt no warmth. Daniel had already left, his side of the bed unnervingly neat, as though he hadn't slept at all. His words still coiled around her, complicit, dragging her deeper into silence. The doorbell rang before noon. Emily's pulse spiked, her first thought that Daniel had returned. Instead, Detective Harper stood on the porch, her gaze sharp and unreadable. "May I come in?" Harper asked. Emily hesitated, then nodded. They sat in the same kitchen where Daniel had once charmed her with coffee and laughter. Now it felt like an interrogation chamber. "I thought you should know," Harper began, sliding a thin file across the table. Inside were photographs, grainy surveillance stills. Emily's stomach lurched. Daniel, unmistakable, standing close to a woman she didn't recognize. The woman's face was tense, her hand gripping his arm like a lifeline. "Her name's Claire Donovan," Harper said. "She was involved with your husband. Not just romantically. Financial ties. Meetings before and after the night of the crime." Emily's throat burned. "That's not possible." Harper's eyes softened only slightly. "I'm sorry. But this woman was found missing 2 weeks ago, and your husband's name keeps surfacing. You need to ask yourself how much you really know." The photographs blurred as Emily's vision swam. Betrayal stabbed sharp, mingling with terror. Daniel's late nights, the lies, the blood in the garden. It all shifted, forming a darker pattern. "I can't," Emily whispered, clutching the edge of the table. "I can't believe," but belief no longer mattered. The evidence lay before her, damning and undeniable. Her husband was not just hiding secrets. He was tethered to a disappearance, to another woman's fate. Harper closed the file gently. "Mrs. Hale, the longer you stay silent, the deeper this will consume you." When the detective left, Emily sat frozen. Daniel's voice from the night before echoing cruelly in her mind. "You're part of it now." Emily sat at the kitchen table long after Harper's departure, the photograph still burning in her mind. Claire Donovan's face haunted her, an unfamiliar woman whose absence now screamed louder than any presence. Every detail sharpened the truth. Daniel had betrayed her not only with lies but with another life, another loyalty. When Daniel returned that evening, the air shifted. He kissed her cheek as though nothing had changed, his touch casual, practiced. But Emily's body stiffened. She felt the weight of Harper's words, of the file hidden in the drawer. "Everything all right?" he asked, narrowing his eyes slightly at her silence. She forced a nod. "Just tired." But her heart raced as she looked at him, calculating the risk of every word. She had spent years trusting the wrong man, and now she was trapped in his shadow. That night she slipped into the bathroom, locking the door with trembling fingers. Harper's card lay in her palm, its edges bent from days of hiding. She stared at the number, the choice looming like a blade over her chest. If she called, she would betray her husband, the man she once loved, the man who had built this house with her, who still smiled like he remembered how to love her back. But if she stayed silent, she would drown with him, buried under his lies, bound to crimes she never chose. Her reflection in the mirror didn't look like hers anymore. Pale, hollow-eyed, desperate, Emily dialed. Each ring tightened the knot in her stomach until Harper's steady voice answered, low and certain. "Mrs. Hale?" Her voice cracked. "I can't do this anymore. I'll help you." The silence on the line carried both relief and gravity. Harper's reply was firm. "Then we'll move quickly. But you must be careful. He can't know." Emily ended the call with shaking hands. When she returned to bed, Daniel stirred, pulling her close. "Cold hands," he murmured, wrapping her in his warmth. Tears stung her eyes, not from comfort but from the unbearable weight of what she had just done. She had crossed the line. There was no going back. She closed her eyes, the sound of her heartbeat roaring in her ears. Soon the truth would come crashing through their walls. And when it did, love would no longer matter. The first flash of red and blue pierced the bedroom window just before dawn. Emily jolted awake, her chest seizing as tires screeched against the pavement outside. A moment later came the thunder of boots, the metallic crash of a battering ram against their front door. Daniel was on his feet instantly, quicker than she had ever seen him move. His mask cracked, not with fear but with fury. "What did you do?" he hissed, his voice raw, stripped of its practiced calm. The door gave way with a splintering roar. Shouts filled the house. "Police! Stay where you are!" As armed officers surged inside, flashlights cut through the dark, beams slicing across walls, scattering over framed photographs that suddenly felt like props in a stage set. Emily stumbled back, shielding her eyes from the glare. Her pulse thundered as officers swarmed the hallway, their commands sharp, unrelenting. Daniel raised his hands, but his expression was venom, his composure gone. "You think this will save you?" He spat at her, his voice almost drowned out by the chaos. "You're no better than me, Emily. You chose this the moment you stayed." Her stomach twisted as his words cut deeper than the noise. She wanted to deny him, to shout her innocence, but the truth of her silence clung like chains. The officers moved swiftly, pinning Daniel against the floor. The mask finally shattered completely. His face was a storm of rage and disdain. the charming husband erased. In his eyes she saw not love, not even betrayal, only the cold glare of a man unmasked. One officer called out from the backyard, his voice tight. "We've got something cloth-stained buried deep." Another from the basement. "More evidence here." The house Emily once believed safe now pulsed with revelations, every room turning against her. As Daniel was hauled upright in handcuffs, he turned his head, locking eyes with her one final time. His smile was jagged, almost proud. "They'll know you were part of it." Emily's knees weakened, but the officers closed in, guiding her away from him. Outside, the dawn light broke over a shattered home, sirens wailing like a requiem. The courthouse smelled of dust and old wood, the kind of place where lives were unstitched with clinical precision. Emily sat in the back row, hands clasped so tightly her knuckles blanched. At the front, Daniel stood in chains, the man she once shared a life with now reduced to case number and evidence. The trial moved swiftly, the prosecution laying out the horrors unearthed from their home, the blood-stained cloth, the records of secret meetings, the missing woman whose fate was finally pieced together. Each fact was another nail driven into the coffin of the man she thought she had married. And yet, as damning as it was, Emily could not stop seeing flashes of who Daniel had once been. The man who twirled her in the kitchen, who whispered dreams of a family, who kissed her forehead after long days. Love and terror braided together inside her, impossible to unravel. When Daniel spoke, he didn't beg for mercy. Instead, he turned toward the gallery, his gaze locking on hers. "This is our story, Emily," he said, voice low but steady. "You made your choice. But don't fool yourself, you'll never be free of me. We are bound. Till death." The words chilled her more than any verdict. The gavel fell, sentencing him to life, but she knew the truth. A marriage like theirs didn't end with a cell. It lingered in memories, in scars carved too deep to erase. Outside the courthouse, cameras flashed, reporters shouted, and strangers whispered her name alongside his. The Hales, a husband and wife at the center of the most horrifying case police had ever seen. Emily kept walking, each step heavier than the last. Freedom tasted hollow. Justice had been served, but it carried no comfort, only the ache of betrayal and the burden of survival. She returned to the house once more, its walls gutted, yellow tape fluttering at the edges. The garden lay overturned, the soil scarred by digging. She stood there, staring at the ruin of the life she thought she'd built, and felt the weight of what could never be repaired. Marriage was supposed to be forever. For Emily, it still was. Not through devotion, not through love, but through the dark tether of truth. Daniel had stolen everything, but he had also left her with a clarity sharper than grief. Till death do us part. And in some ways, even beyond